Morning, we'll call this morning's meeting to order for Tuesday, July 21st. First thing on the agenda is the approval of the agenda.
Move approval.
Second.
Got a motion by Jim, second by Jenny to approve the agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Citizens to be heard. Is anybody, did we get any calls for any citizens?
We did not.
Okay. I think everybody else is here for things on the agenda, so.
Are we still not allowing citizen input physically at meetings? Is it still only through?
I guess the board has not made the decision either way to open up meetings to the public other than to who is presenting. And so as of right now, I guess the main way of accepting that feedback would be through online or calling in.
Okay, because there's one person that called me, asked if they can come to a meeting. I asked them if they could sit in. I didn't know, I said if there aren't too many people in the room, they can sit in. So I don't know if I gave the right information or not there.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, we've made the decision that social distancing, as long as we have the ability to social distance, just looking at Kathy, and so we certainly could offer that as an option if that's what the board would like.
Okay. I see he's not, the person that called me is not here, so that's, but he may show up, I don't know.
Mr. Chair, I think for guidance, though, I think we should give some direction, and I think we should allow citizens to come here, but I do think that somebody has to have control of the social distance area within the audience, and it might be appropriate to have, if they're here for a particular agenda item, they don't necessarily need to sit in here until that agenda item is up. And so
That's pretty much the information I gave him, is that there may be
Yeah.
a waiting time till some leave and some come. Okay.
Yeah, and then have the other room available across the hall for them to wait in.
Okay, very
I
good.
think the ability to voice any concern online is important, but sometimes I think that there are people that may not want to do that and may want to
Right.
physically be able to express their concerns. So I agree, if someone wants to come for citizens to be heard, that's fine, or if there's a specific issue on the agenda, they can wait so we can monitor space.
We'll make that adjustment on the website also.
Okay. Next thing is the approval of the minutes with July 7th, which are in your packet.
Move approval.
Second. You got a motion by Kevin, second by Jim to approve the July 7 minutes. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, okay. Approval of payment of bills and vouchers.
Move to approve.
Second.
Excuse me, I didn't hear who. Oh,
I made the motion.
Grant made the motion, second by Jim, to approve the bills. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, on to our weekly COVID update with Kathy and Cheryl and Jamie.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I gave you 3 handouts. One is the Minnesota COVID case information, that first single page. And that just gives the latest data that we have, the latest numbers. And you can see we have 47,000, a little over 47,000 positive cases in Minnesota. 922 are new cases, so that's been an increase that we haven't seen for a while. So some of that has to do with testing, but some of it is also because of the community spread. So it's a combination. About 86% of the people have recovered in Minnesota, so that's good. The number of completed tests, we're at 867,410. So that's a pretty good milestone. The governor wanted about 20,000 tests a day, so that's good that they're able to continue on with the number of tests. And then you'll see the age category, the hospitalizations too. So in Minnesota, which is, for Clay County, it's different because our hospitalizations are occurring, the majority of them in Sanford and Essentia. But these are just hospitalizations across Minnesota. So there's 247 that are hospitalized, that's across the whole state, and 115 that are in ICU. And then you see just the spread. Now, it's a little deceiving on the travel exposure, especially for Clay County, because they're counting travel going over to the North Dakota side. So that's counted in the numbers, which we know there's a lot of people going back and forth. So it's not that the travel exposure is higher because of travel. It's just that they're counting that travel from Minnesota to North Dakota. And then on the second page, the double-sided page where we have the confirmed cases. So as of July 20th, we were at 669. And again, sometimes these numbers will vary based on when they get the data and when it gets inputted. So the numbers can change, but 669 as of the 20th, 602 that are recovered or out of isolation. And then we have 28 active cases, and we have, sad to say, but we have an additional death. So we're up to 39, and you may have heard already, we have a 9-month-old in Clay County death. No, that's the youngest death in Minnesota. There's been some deaths from that 0 to 5 throughout the United States, but this is the youngest one. And it's really a specific situation and a very isolated incident. The infant did have respiratory symptoms that were consistent with COVID. So there was inflammation in the lungs. And they also did a nasal swab that tested positive for COVID. The infant did not have any underlying health conditions. So they do have the CDC evaluating this case because it is very unique.
I have a question on that too.
Sure.
You said all the hospital ones are in Fargo. Was this infant not in a hospital then, or?
That's correct. The infant was not in a hospital.
Okay. Very good.
And so CDC is really looking at, the physiological changes in terms of the progression of this illness. So it's a very specific case. I can't really give much more than that it's just, we're waiting on CDC to evaluate that, and also the medical examiner to see if there were other things with this infant. So it's a sad case, unfortunate, and I don't know if you have any questions that I can actually answer. It's a protected case as well, just so there's not all the information out there, just to protect the family.
Okay.
I have a question, maybe you don't have the answer. As we go later into the year, into influenza season and RSV season, so many of those affect children more. And so is the concern now with it presenting in a under 1-year-old that they will play off each other in terms of severity going forward?
Well, we do know that as we go into the influenza season, you're right, so if we have influenza circulating as well as COVID, it'll be very challenging. We hope that people will take advantage of the influenza vaccine, because if you get both the viruses, it's going to be more impactful. We know that for people and for children. And the RSV, yeah, I wonder if we'll see more people presenting or calling their physicians. So as children develop respiratory symptoms, there would be, because it's all respiratory. So influenza is respiratory, COVID is respiratory. So I think there might be a heightened awareness about if there's some respiratory symptoms that people may be more likely to contact their physician right away to make sure it's not COVID, and if it's RSV or some other. But it is going to be kind of complicated in the fall, because I think we're going to see everything circulating at the time. So it's going to be quite challenging, I believe, to discern, the difference if they have influenza or if they have COVID particularly. Does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't know if it's an easy answer.
Right, yeah. Some physicians are expecting that they might see higher numbers of people calling and checking about their children's respiratory symptoms. Any other
I've got a
questions?
question. Yes. Kathy, One statistic I noticed that is omitted from most of this information is the so-called case fatality rate. And that is described as the number of deaths divided by the number of positive cases. Worldwide, the percentage is 4.2%.
Right.
In the U.S., the percentage is 3.7%. In Minnesota, it's 3.2%. But in Clay County, it's 5.8%. Do you have any idea why we have a nearly twice as high rate of case fatality rate in Clay County?
You know, I have not got any information on that data, but I can certainly find out for you. I don't know why that percentage is so high.
Okay? I would like to find out what's
Sure.
going on with that.
I can get that
And it may
information.
be
to you.
simply that we have such a high percentage of residents that are in long-term care.
Yeah, we did have a lot of long-term care.
Fatalities.
Fatalities and incidents at the beginning. In fact, the majority of our deaths were long-term care. So that could be the possibility, but I would like to confirm that, so I'll get you that information.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions about the data or the case? Okay. Well, Cheryl, do you want to talk about, we'll just give you an update on the schools.
Good morning. Last week, Commissioner Mojo had a question about the number of international students in Clay County, and so I did follow up with that and reached out to both Concordia and Minnesota State University of Moorhead. So for Concordia, out of about 2,000 students, I'll approximately have 20 international students, and they reported that part of the reasons that those numbers are down is because of travel and visa issues. For MSUM, approximately 5,000 registered students, and they have about 30 international students that will be on campus. And of course, that also includes, I don't have the exact number of the international students that remained here from last spring semester too that were unable to get home. So not a real high number for either one of them.
But I appreciate you getting that. I think that's important going forward and.
Absolutely.
There.
And we're having ongoing discussions with both campuses as they continue to move forward to plan. We're probably about a month out from students coming back to campus. I know Concordia has offered in the past, their freshmen have always been required to live on campus, and this fall they are stating that if they aren't able to live off campus, if they're in the local area, can still live at home, that they certainly are permissible to do so. We're also continuing discussions with K through 12. Initial guidance came out roughly a month ago, and MDH is also making some revisions to that, and so all of our K-12 districts are making plans to find out whether or not they're going to be in class, or if it's going to be a hybrid of partially in class and partially online learning, or if it would be totally online learning. And of course, I think for that third scenario, our numbers would have to go up significantly for that to happen, because everyone really understands the importance of having children in school, and especially for those children with special needs that receive extra services at school, it's highly important to their daily life too.
Are you expecting Governor Walz to make that announcement at the end of this week, or is it next?
Yeah.
I was just informed this morning from Kelsey, our PIO, that Governor Walz is doing a briefing today at 2 o'clock.
Okay,
So yeah, we anticipate that he would speak to that for sure.
great, thank you.
Yeah. And then I'll have Jamie talk about just kind of we handed out a new form, it's the two-sided one, just about some of our operations, so, yeah, I'm sorry.
Good morning. So this basically, our incident management team is reviewing kind of what our objectives are for the week and what things we need to work on, most of which, if you look at the objectives, how it's laid out, most of them are ongoing, so it's continuing to be the work. But I wanted to highlight a few things The first objective talks about the information for the public, and the second is about our external partners. So those are really about communicating both. Our public information team is working with using multiple sites, one of which is also they're posting on Facebook the board meetings, the presentations, the press conferences. So continuing to use all avenues to get information out to the public. A lot of that is just a link to CDC or MDH on what is the most current. And then the second objective is really what we're doing with our partners. And so we have one abbreviation in there under the second objective is the HAN, the Health Alert Network. And so that's where information that we need to share from, sometimes it comes from CDC to the Minnesota Department of Health and local public health, and sometimes from the Minnesota Department of Health. But that is to give information to our local healthcare partners in the community, and occasionally it's our school partners as well. So that's our Health Alert Network. We've talked a lot about the Red River Valley Task Force and the priorities that we're working on for making sure that we get testing. I do want to point out one comment that I was thinking about is that we were fortunate in Clay County to have testing for our most vulnerable populations earlier than much of Minnesota because of our opportunities for testing on the North Dakota side. So that might be why we had a higher positivity rate with our long-term care. Just a thought when you were asking the question that I was thinking about. But moving on to our third objective, the IQES, Isolation and Quarantine Essential Services. We talked a little bit about the people that are in isolation and quarantine, and we reach out to them if there are things that they need, often just connecting them with the local grocery store that is able to deliver, or getting resources through the food shelf. So that's part of what we talked about there. We've talked a lot about long-term care, so I'll skip over that objective. One thing I just want to highlight is we still do have our long-term care liaisons working weekly now with our long-term care providers, including our corporate foster care, just checking in with them primarily to see what they're doing in terms of testing, if they still need testing, and then also the resources they have. And Cheryl is working with them to get the resources that they would need for PPE and things. Let's see, so then I'm going to skip over to the back page to highlight a couple things. And one thing that Josh has been working on has been closed pods. So I'm going to skip down. These objectives are not numbered, but the second from the bottom. So it's education and closed pods, MOU. And so that is, POD is a point of dispensing, and MOU, Memorandum of Understanding. So that's something Josh is working on, thinking in advance about the fact that if we have a vaccine that comes, and how can we distribute that vaccine. So those points of dispensing would be working with our partners that are already able to give injections. So that vaccine would come to public health and would be distributed out to the points of dispensing, like healthcare providers, long-term care providers, who are able to administer vaccines. So he's working on, that's an ongoing thing for emergency preparedness with Josh, but he is also working on updating those points of dispensing and memorandums of understanding. So that's something that he's been busy working on too. Any questions about the objectives?
Just want to comment that Josh is our planning section chief. So he is, throughout this pandemic, he does all the planning, but he also has to document everything for the reports. So he's not only doing the work ongoing, but also, like Jamie mentioned, planning for the future for like our points of dispensing when the vaccine arrives. So this is all Josh's work as he continues to do the planning piece.
So Kathy or Jamie, in these objectives, have we, to the implementation of any of these, are we considering costs? Kathy goes to our CARES Act committee group. There's where I'm getting at here is we want to make sure that your department is well funded to handle all of these things moving forward. And it goes back to again, to the colleges. What are their intentions for future testing? And I'm assuming that testing is going to fall back on public health to do, or do they have their own program in place?
So currently, Minnesota Department of Health is not in favor of doing initial baseline testing for students coming back to campus because they don't have the resources when you think about the number of students in the state of Minnesota.
Resources meaning just the available tests, or?
Maybe available tests, but just the logistics of it.
Okay.
Two, because it takes a lot of manpower to be able to bring people to Moorhead, say if they're going to either any of our campuses here in Clay County, to be able to provide to do that. And so that is not their recommendation at this time. But we did have a Minnesota Department of Health representative come to speak with both Concordia and MSUM last Monday, which we mentioned a little bit at last week's board meeting, and just talking about that a number of students from both of those campuses, or any of our campuses in Clay County, also live on the North Dakota side. And so through the Red River Valley Task Force, if the opportunity arises, and as I explained to both of these universities, we don't know what that's going to look like. We don't know if North Dakota is going to be able to provide any support to actually bring that testing to campus, or if it would be staged somewhere on the North Dakota side and people would have to go over across to get tested. But that would just be for a baseline testing. So I believe that both Concordia and MSUM are taking all of that into consideration. It's certainly not going to be mandatory, but if there are individuals that wish to be tested, we'll certainly do everything that we can to assist them with that.
And I know Minnesota Department of Health also recognizes that they just don't have the all of the means for ongoing testing. So they are recommending that we use some CARES money if we can come up with facilities to provide testing.
That's where I'm going with this.
So if we can, and there are some counties that have allocated some of the CARES money to ongoing testing, and so if we can find a vendor, they're also having challenges finding vendors that can do the testing. So if we can find vendors in our community, and then we have the CARES money to be able to pay for that, that's what they're asking us to look at.
Yeah, I think it would be in our best interest to reach out and to have a standby facility that might be willing to, you know, those funds, I can't think of a better way to use those funds, you know, other than to help businesses that have suffered severely from this, but.
Great.
So I would encourage you to, you know, between the three of you and your department, to come back to our CARES committee group with a number that you think would be good for us to reserve. And including in that would be additional tracing costs as we look forward to what Commissioner referred to as when we start getting into this season where we could have multiple respiratory deals going on here, so.
Yeah, and we have a Red River Valley Task Force meeting tomorrow, so we plan to have a discussion about the testing and then determine, you know, how we're going to work collaboratively on that, so.
Thank you.
Any further questions for him? No, thank you for the report. Update again this week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next thing on our agenda is the interviews for appointments and reappointments to the Buffalo Red River Watershed Board. We currently have 2 3-year terms and 1 1-year term on the Buffalo Watershed Board. And we'll do we have 3 candidates that we'll interview this morning. As far as in particular order, I think we're just going to go with I don't know if we do by positions or that you applied for. I think we'll just go alphabetically and start off with Mark. Lucky enough to start with A there, so you're normally the first always called on first, I think. Okay, Mark. We just have about 5 general questions that we're going to ask each candidate, pretty much. And we're going to ask, I think I'll ask the questions, and if any of the fellow commissioners have got any follow-up questions on any of these, speak up on that. Now, the first question I guess we're going to ask Mark is, what experience would you bring to the Buffalo Red River Watershed District Board of Managers?
Well, I've been a manager for 6 years now, two terms, and I think I've lived in Clay County my whole life, farmed in Clay County my whole life. I know a little bit about the water and the way the watershed works. I know the first year I was on the watershed, it took me almost a year just to learn what all the acronyms meant and stuff. So it's a learning curve, and I think I know. I tell the joke. I married my high school sweetheart, and before I got married, I was related to half the county, and after I got married, I was related to the other half of the county. So I know a lot of people. They feel comfortable calling me every time it rains. I get a couple of calls. I think Jenny probably gets a couple of calls, and so we're trying to work things out. But I guess that would be my experience.
Okay. Any follow-up questions from any of them? Okay. I guess the next question is sort of a general question, but why would you want to be a watershed manager?
I've asked myself that question many times. No, it's to serve the public, and it's one of those jobs that you can do a lot of good, but you do get a lot of phone calls and stuff, and I think I'm pretty good at dealing with people and trying to make everybody as happy as we could. I like, to use some of Bruce Albright's, there's 2 sides to every coin always, and so you got to look at all the sides and try and make the right decisions, and I think I have that ability.
Okay. Our next one is, what is your philosophy on managing drainage?
Well, drainage has to be a whole watershed type program. You can't, the days when, I just got rid of my water on my neighbor and my neighbor just got rid of his water, and those things aren't going to work anymore. We have to have a system that works, makes it work. Everybody shares a little bit of the cost. Everybody shares maybe a little bit of the pain when things don't quite work so good. God has a way of humbling us when we think we know everything, and then he gives us 4.6 inches of rain or something. So you plan for the best you can and try and make a system work. And I guess that would be my philosophy.
Okay. The fourth question we got, have you had personal experience with Watershed Board in the past? If yes, was it generally a positive experience? And how would that experience affect your service as a watershed manager?
Before I got on the board, I'm a farmer, so we met with the Watershed Board many times, and actually our area was, where I live, was what created the Watershed Board. When the watershed was first created in late 60s, early 70s, it was just the Buffalo Watershed Board, and now we are huge because of, it just increased the size of the watershed because everything the stuff that runs this way. I've had very good luck with, very good experience with the Watershed Board before this. Back when all this was starting, I
was fairly young, and we'd go to these meetings, and it was kind of, back then it was, well, my grandfather told your grandfather over his dead body, were you gonna get that culvert in there? And part of that now is they're all dead, so now we can do something right. So but there's water, it's like the old saying, whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting. But you have to kind of make things work. So I've had a very, very good experience with the watershed so far.
Okay. Our final question is, the Clay County Commission has been in support of the diversion project. If appointed to the board, how would you support efforts to achieve completion of this project?
That's one thing with me being on the board, because apparently I am the only public official in Clay or Cass County that has a conflict of interest. Our attorneys have advised me not to vote on anything that has to do with the diversion, and the way it was explained to me was if I vote for the diversion, the Wilkin JPA is probably going to sue us. If I vote against the diversion authority is probably going to sue us. So as my whole goal now was, when I was put on the land committee, was to make sure that the people that are sacrificing are getting compensated properly. And I would still look to make that one of my higher priorities as the diversion goes forward.
I might have a follow-up to that. As most of you know, Mark was appointed to the Governor's Task Force for the Diversion Authority by Governor Mark Dayton to be part of working out a compromise or a better solution for citizens, and he actively took part in that and was very helpful and represented Clay County well in that appointment.
Okay. Anybody got any other follow-up questions?
I do, yes. You just stated that your attorneys advised you that if you voted in favor of the diversion, then you would likely incur lawsuit from the Wilkin County JPA. And if you voted for the diversion, or I'm sorry, the other way around.
Yep.
If you voted for the diversion, you would be sued by the Wilkin County JPA. But we are the Clay County Commission, and we appointed you.
Yes.
Were you not bound by that more than anything else?
I felt I was bound by what the Buffalo Watershed attorney told us,
Okay.
told me
All right.
not to.
So
not
the
to
Buffalo
vote.
Watershed attorney meant more than the Clay County Commission that appointed you.
Well, I don't think the Clay County Commission appointed me to vote for everything that you guys supported. We're individuals to make up our own minds, I believe, but if you're going to answer the question that way, I would say yes. The attorneys the Buffalo Watershed attorney told me not to vote. That was the Buffalo Watershed attorney. If you want me to, I could have had the Clay County attorney go over why the reasons why.
I wasn't going to ask you a question, but in terms of this conflict, I find it amazing that you'd be given advice based on a potential lawsuit one way or another. I thought conflicts had more to do with personal gain.
That was the reason, was because my family could personally gain. And then discussing through it came, if you vote this way, you vote this way. But it was the original conflict of interest is because I have land and finance stuff in the staging area and in the area. So
I mean,
that was the gist of why I had conflict of interest.
Yeah, we make decisions all the time that can be under threat of a lawsuit one
Yep.
way or the other.
And I
And it's
kinda
no
misspoke there.
different
That
with
was-
your board, but
Yeah.
in terms of the conflict, and then the conflict, shouldn't have anything to do
No,
with
The
that.
conflict is the financial reason, and that was, as far as, I said, well, I'm put on here to vote. I said, you know, you have financial interests here, one way or another, and you helping make decisions could affect how much financial gain or loss your family or you whatever had. And then then she said, well, and no matter what you vote for, you're probably going to get sued. That's the way I should have put it, but it was more, it is the financial part
So,
that is the
and I
conflict.
appreciate you clarifying that.
Yeah.
So, so if somebody has a potential conflict for financial gain, it's a reasonable reason to not vote. Should that, under that same circumstance then, should that manager, in the case of a watershed board, still be allowed to have the dialogue regarding a project and maybe influence others?
What I was told is if I wanted to do that, I had to get up out of my chair and walk over and be Mark Anderson, the citizen.
Okay.
I could not do it from the podium. Yeah.
Okay. Did you do that?
A couple of times, not very often. It's like my wife tells me I have the right to remain silent. I don't have the ability. So there was a couple of meetings, but I kind of had to bite my lip a little bit. But it's is what it is.
Thank you.
Okay. Do you have any final thing to add?
No, just want to thank you
another
for the
question.
ability. Oh, sorry.
Okay, one more.
No, as we all know, and you know, because you've worked with this with Jerry, the board is changing in terms of administration now with a long-time retirement. Where do you see the partnership of the other counties in terms of helping you through what the leadership changes, or, I mean, we all want what's best for the watershed, and I just what's your insight on what this transition looks like?
Just personally, I think eventually, right now, Houston, we hire all our employees from Houston Engineering. And I think eventually, the staff at the Barnesville office will be Buffalo Red Watershed staff. And we will still contract with Houston for the engineering and the things we can't do. That's the way I think it's gonna go. We're still investigating the costs, looking at, you know, there's all kinds of things involved when you have your own staff. You know, HR, payroll, vehicles, you guys know, you know. And since we hadn't done it before, there's a lot of stuff to go over and figure out what's the best. I think that's the way it's gonna go. We checked, there's a lot of watersheds that do it that way. There's a few that still do it the way we do, have done it in the past, and I think it's better public relations. Before I got on the board, I heard many times as well, how come the watershed vehicle has Houston Engineering on it? Are they running the watershed, or are you running, or what's the deal? So I think in the long run, if it's the vehicle or whatever's out there says Buffalo Red River Watershed, they know who's out there, and that's I think it's better for public relations and probably maybe cheaper. We're still working on that.
And I appreciate that. I think as a commissioner that serves in the rural area, I think the biggest importance is that we don't lose the service that the watershed has been known for. There's a reason that the Buffalo Red is really looked at statewide for one of the most functioning watersheds that's implementing great projects, and I appreciate that presence. And however it looks going forward, I just really don't want to lose the high quality work and projects that Buffalo's implemented.
I agree.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
Thank you guys for the consideration.
Thanks, Mark.
Paul, we'll take you next. Gives you an interest in the one-year position, or? Okay. All right, I guess we're gonna start with the same set of questions. You've probably heard most of them. I mean, I'm sure you heard most of them, but I'll repeat them again. And what experience do you bring to the Buffalo Red River Watershed District Board of Managers?
I guess somewhat limited, but in fact, I grew up on a farm and farmed a lot of land, or not a lot of land, but I had a sizable farm in Clay, and in fact had some land in Woken. And through those years, growing up on the farm and then 13 years of farming on my own, there were times we'd get involved with the watershed board for drainage. So that would be part of it. On the outside, I don't know if this is the right time to talk about it, but my background, I've been involved with Clay Soil and Water since 1985. 30 years old. And so that was a while ago. And certainly it, over the years, for whatever reason, I've gravitated toward policy on a, not only a local basis, but I always found a regional engagement and state engagement to be something of interest. And through that, I ended up on quite a few committees with Soil and Water. And through Soil and Water, I over time became director to the state board. With that, more committee work, more legislative work, working hand in hand, and then most in going directly back to watersheds and some experience, I ended up on the government, groundwater government roundtable, where we in fact developed the One Watershed, One Plan. And I've been on that for 6 years, continue to be on that. And on that are the 3 executive directors, who would be for Brian Martinson with the counties, and then Emily Javins with the watershed, and then Leanne Buck with the State Association for the Soil and Water. And I think through that process, and again, maybe a little more of a statewide view, but also the way we're heading with funding, for the watershed districts, a way to work through on a watershed basis, which I really believe in, and then bring it back to a local level. Now, with the One Watershed shed plan being in the planning stage, I'm on the policy committee along with Jenny and Frank. You've been there, and being part of that. And be part of the watershed district, it would be not only educational, but I think hopefully the board and the basin would find my input with some value from my experience.
Just listening to what talking about your background and reading what your background was, I almost feel like you should be interviewing us or something like that. But you've been around for quite a while.
Yeah.
Thank you for your service.
I think, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Piggybacking off of that, you've also served on the Clay County Planning Commission and Board of Adjustments,
Right.
correct?
I think I've been on Clay County Planning maybe 13 years, and then Board of Adjustments now I think I'm on year 4, I think. Really enjoyed that, by the way.
And I think with that, you are aware of environmental setbacks probably
Yes.
better than a lot of those people on there. So I think it would probably serve you well, is knowing that and being present on the watershed.
Okay, I guess the next question is, with all this experience you have, why would you want to be the watershed manager?
I think it is, at this time in my career, I've been a real estate agent for 30 years. I think my way of maybe retiring is going to be more in public service. And I see this as one more opportunity or one more step of a direction that maybe I could go for a while. I don't know what that means. But sometimes when you're asked and it feels like it could be a good fit, I think it'd be all right. If I right now I'll be more than likely state president for Soil and Water starting in December. That'll be for 2 years. And at the end of that, I've pretty well done everything you can in Soil and Water. I mean, at that point will have served Clay County 37 years, 38 years. I've served the state. I've been a national delegate for Soil and Water and some other associations, and national work isn't really my fit. I don't really care for it that much. So I would rather it continue some way, maybe more on a state and local level. That's what I like the best, and I think I fit best that way. Does that make any sense? So,
Very good.
okay.
That's all right. And what is your philosophy of managing drainage?
I certainly believe that the way the One Watershed plan is developing and will implement over time is definitely the right way to go. I think water quality and water management, along drainage, along with water quality and storage, I think they all fit. They need to be on a watershed basin, and that really involves all the way from the source to the Red River, and being able to have the priorities of how best to do that, and not be all hung up on county lines, jurisdictional limits. And we're doing that anyway. I mean, it's built into that. We do a lot of projects with Becker County, Woken County already, and not so much with Otter Tail, but it is still part of the system. And we're all responsible for it.
Okay. Thank you. Have you had personal experience with the Watershed Board in the past? If yes, was it a general or positive experience? And how would that experience affect your service as a watershed manager?
Yeah. I guess everything I did on the farm was positive. There was changing to some of the ditches of the land we farmed. As far as other than that with the board, all I can say, and I know it's an upcoming question, I've been an advocate for the diversion, and I did speak on behalf of myself as a citizen not too long ago to the board, and giving public comment that I was in support of Plan B, the plan that's going forward. And I don't know how that was received by the board or not, but, so I guess that remains to be seen.
Okay. Okay, and the last question, which we probably already answered, the Clay County Board has been in support of the diversion project. If appointed to the board, how would you support efforts to achieve completion of this project? I think you've answered part of that already.
Yeah, and again, I don't have the depth. I haven't been going to the authority meetings, nor have I been going to the watershed meetings. But I do know, right now it's my understanding it's still with the administrative law judge to suit those type things. So, and I'm not privy to, or at least what's been said behind the scenes. But that being said, absolutely, without a doubt, Clay County and our regional area needs this protection for our business and citizens in our area. And it's going to affect 12,000 homes if it doesn't happen. And the cost would be immense. At the same time, as we'll see, again, we just have to see how the suit plays out. I want, it's important to me. A lot of the people that farm in that area are friends, and I want to, I want to make sure they're treated wholly. But yet at the same time, when you do big projects, people are affected, and you just try to make them whole the best you can. And some people, I understand, will never be satisfied. But at the same time, we have to move on and do what we think is best for the greater good.
Thank you. Any follow-up questions?
Just follow up a little bit, as you know, the same thing that I said with Mark. We're in a point of changeover at the watershed, and I appreciate the fact that you've been involved on the advisory boards and with the One Watershed, One Plan. In terms of going forward with administration, do you have any thoughts on how the watershed is best served?
Not too much, unfortunately. Yeah, I mean, gosh, I'll say it's our age, right? But I would have enjoyed working with Bruce. You know, Bruce is a good friend, and we just got to know each other over the years. Yet at the same time, I mean, Kathy's got a talent, and I think will serve us well. The other parts about Houston, that piece of it, I think I need to listen and learn. Yeah, I just don't know enough at this point to really say anything with much background. But I'm open.
Any other questions, Paul? No, thank you for your time, Paul.
Okay.
Thank you, Paul.
And Jerry? You got all your answers ready, or do I have to ask the questions here?
Good morning, Commissioners. I was taking notes.
All right. All right. First question again. What experience do you bring to the Buffalo Watershed District Board of Managers?
Well, I've been on the board for a long time, as you well know. So I have that kind of experience, but I think I like to think my academic background and my area that I would call my area of expertise in biology and particularly ecology helps me out quite a lot too. I have done research in the area of wetlands for years and bring that to the table. I have been active in the Minnesota Association of Watershed Districts for many, many years, served on the board and served as president for some time. And currently I'm on the Board of Water and Soil Resources as well, which has also offered another look, and I think another avenue of experience in looking at watersheds. I not only am familiar with Buffalo Red watershed now, I'm familiar with about 44 other ones in the state as well, and looking at how they operate, what they do, the problems that they're faced with, and so forth. So I like to think I bring a lot of experience anyway to the table. Try and temper that, realizing that we do have unique problems here too in our watershed district that one has to be aware of.
Okay. And the other general question pretty much is why would you want to be, in your case, continue to be a watershed manager?
Well, I think no different than the other gentlemen that have been here. It's one of public service. First of all, I believe everybody deserves the opportunity to offer their maybe unique capabilities in working in public service. But I also think it's everyone's duty to be involved in public service, whatever that may be. It might be delivering food door to door, or something, but or whatever it is. But I think that's my major reason that I want to be involved. Certainly, I live here in Moorhead, and I see the problems that we have from time to time with flooding. That also happens in the rural areas as well. We have a huge problem with water quality within our country, within our state. And in Minnesota, of course, water is a resource that we are tremendously aware of how important it is to us economically as well. So those are reasons why I would want to serve. I think there are just a lot of things when you, one of the things I really want to see done and completed, and it's been mentioned earlier here, is the One Watershed, One Plan for our area. This is something that some of you have worked with, and I'm sure you are aware of, but it brings a look at how we manage water in our state, doing it on a watershed basis, and I'd like to see that completed. And I also want to see the success of our watershed district. I think that's another reason I want to serve. I think it has been a very excellent district over the years. We have completed a number of important projects that help our citizens. And I hope we have more to come. I'm sure we do. We have a number of projects that will enhance our watershed district, will help our citizens, and I want to be a part of that.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for sharing your philosophy on public service. I really agree with that too, you know. Should have more people involved in that. Very good view. What is your philosophy on managing drainage?
Well, drainage is certainly necessary. We have, I say we, humankind has changed the face of the earth considerably, and that's true even maybe more so in Red River Valley than many other places. We've sculpted the land, and we've made it so that we can live on it, and we can farm it, and so forth. And in the process of doing that, we've created a lot of problems. We've created problems of of excess water coming off the land at certain times. We've created the problem of water quality with that excess water. And so we have the problems. Now we have to solve them. And I think we've done a pretty good job of doing this over the years. But while drainage is absolutely necessary for us, for agriculture, for an urban person like myself, it's necessary. But so is water quality, and so is safety. So we have to work to make these come together so that we don't have the problem of flooding, or at least we can mitigate it as much as possible. We can mitigate the problem of water quality. So I look at it as a challenge I'm sure we can deal with. One of the things that concerns me is that times are changing too. Peak flows are increasing. And I don't think it's going to get any better. I'm of the opinion that the changes that are taking place, we're likely to see maybe even some greater peak flows. And that means a greater possibility of major flooding. So we have to be prepared for that. Meaning that, and we have to look at our drainage systems, make sure our drainage systems can handle these without causing damage, or at least limit that damage as much as possible. So I look at drainage as being something that is absolutely necessary, but it also has to be managed, and has to be managed intelligently. And I guess that's where I come down on it.
Okay. Okay. Have you, of course you've had experience with the Watershed Board, but have you had personal experience with the Watershed Board in the past? If yes, was it generally a positive experience? And how would that experience affect your service as a watershed manager?
Well, I've had a lot of experience with the Watershed District and the board in the past, all right. It's generally been very, very positive. I think over the many years that I've been on the board, it's been a really good group to work with, good functioning board. And while we may have our differences, I know we've had differences in the past, and we have differences now, and we'll have differences in the future. But generally speaking, we've been able to work these out. I look at it as, we're 7 individuals in there that we should be managing the entire watershed district. We should look at it as one watershed. I certainly bring my experience of Moorhead to that board, and maybe more of an urban perspective at times. I like to think I got a pretty good rural perspective too on many things with background, but while I bring these perspectives to the board, we've got to work together and come to agreement. Not that we'll all have to agree, but we have to come to at least enough agreement to where we can move forward and do the right thing. I've enjoyed working with the board, and while we'll have these disagreements, I think they can be worked out, and I hope at least they're worked out for the entire watershed and not not just one part of it here or there.
And then our final question is, the Clay County Commission has been supporting the diversion project. If appointed to the board, how would you support efforts to achieve completion of this project?
Well, as I said, I think, flooding is, that's the reason the watershed was initially founded, was because of flooding. And flooding is still a major concern. Not the only concern, but the major concern. I live in Moorhead. I see the problems in Moorhead and our urban area. I see the dangers of flooding, the expense of that, the fact that this whole region around here relies largely upon this urban area, Fargo, Moorhead, economically. And so that makes it very, 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 very important to protect. And, how do you do that? Well, we all know the studies that have been done and what the conclusions that have emanated from those. I think the diversion project that has been decided upon, I think it'll be completed someday. And it's, they've been given a permit by the DNR. It's being contested right now, but they were given a permit. And I don't think, our watershed is not something that's going to stop that project. We have to be able to work with the process and do what we can do to protect the landowners that are being impacted, make sure that they are getting what they deserve out of this, at the same time making sure that the people that are impacted by the possibility of these horrendous floods are also protected. So I think, we have to go about this in a reasonable manner, realizing that we're not the deciders in this process. I think we're a player, but we're not ones that's going to make the decision of whether it's going to happen or not. We're in it. Let's work with it. Let's work with the process, and let's make this go on and get it done with.
Any follow-up questions?
Thank you. Jerry, one of your answers piqued my interest, and it was when you talked about the peak flows are increasing. You didn't just make that up, did you?
I hope not. Well, this is something that's being shown by, and it's not only our river, it's rivers all over the country. The gauges are showing that peak flows are increasing.
Yeah, and so, how this relates to the bottom, or the last question that you had in terms of flooding and flood protection, I think there's been, like you said, studies throughout our country and the history, not only do the studies show it, but the histories from the 30s and 40s on to this time shows a steady rise in potential flooding. It was also done, independent study was done as part of the diversion project, that the court went to some independent analysis. And one of the things they said was that we were wrong in using data that goes back to the late 1800s through today, because that actually distorted and brought down what has been happening over the last 50 or 60 years. And the last 50 or 60 years is, the incline in the frequencies has gone up. And, so I think those independent studies also said that I guess what I'm trying to say is they agree with your statement that peak flows are increasing. And it's not just a local thing here, but we've had independent people throughout the country that have analyzed this and agree with you. And I just wanted to bring that up, so. There's no question in there, unless you want to comment.
Now, we've seen not only a greater amount of rainfall, our annual precipitation. I look back at, because I used to use these all the time in class, the old means that, they were on a decadal basis. Every decade we'd change, we'd update these. And when I first came, it was, I don't know, it was through 1972 or something like that. And we were talking about, 19 inches of rainfall per year. And now I don't know what the latest is, but we're closer to 21, 22 inches of rainfall per year. Our average annual precipitation has increased. But it isn't only the average annual precipitation has increased, it is the intensity of the storms that have increased as well. And so we're seeing more of these 3, 4, 5, 6 inch precipitation events that we didn't have in the past, at least not that often. And that's what is of critical importance in looking at the problems that we have of flooding, and why I think that we have to have protection. And I wish it didn't have to be what it is that's being designed. I'd be more than happy if it wasn't. But you have to look at what will do the job, and that's not my job. I'm not an engineer. But I do take engineers seriously, and I take their studies seriously, and their models seriously, and believe in them. They're based on science as well. So that's why we are. We're in a period of climate change, and it's been going on. It's going to continue for some time, and I think we have to be concerned about it. And we better do everything we can. It means designing ditches that will carry enough water, designing the culverts, the sizing of culverts and so forth that will work, so you're not losing all your roads every time one of these things happens. So there's a lot to be involved here to think about and be concerned of.
Well, thank you for your service, Jerry.
Out of fairness, I'll ask the same question to you. I know you are on the HR committee the watershed has moving forward in terms of how you look at your administrative structure. Can you speak to that at all?
Well, yeah. I think the winds of change are here as far as what is maybe going to happen in our watershed district. But what I am really concerned of right now, that I've voiced concern about, is how quick we go about it. I don't think there's any doubt that somewhere down the road here, we're going to be, I shouldn't be saying we, the watershed district will be hiring, its own staff, at least its office staff, the administrator and other office staff. How far do you go with that? I don't know, but I think that will eventually probably will happen. And, but my greatest concern is that we don't rush this. It's really a complex process. We've got a lot of things to consider. We've got a lot of moving pieces that we have to worry about, making sure that we don't lose track of things and lead to a big failure in the district as a result of it. So I think we should take a good long look at this and time and planning before we ever go at making that switch. That's been my argument about this to the board. How long? I don't know. This COVID thing, as far as I'm concerned, has thrown a real wrench in the cogs. I don't like to make decisions the way we are set right now, major decisions like that. I would rather put it off until things have settled down and we can get together more as a board and talk about this at length and have maybe some work, some studies done to find out what needs to be done. So I guess, Commissioner Moncho, I think that it's probably going to happen, but I would rather see it happen 6 months down the road than I would 2 months down the road. I just think that's entirely too fast for something like that to happen.
Can I follow up on that? I guess I don't know the reasoning behind the discussions right now, why there's this maybe interest in switching from what has been working very well for our watershed district. I've seen our watershed district get state awards for things that they've done, and we've got an outgoing administrator that I don't know if there was an administrator more respected in the entire state than what your administrator was. But I also, and I'm thankful anyway right now that there's been a committee outside of just your board looking at this. I think, and the fact that Commissioner Mojo represented on there, and I think it's critical when you're going to make decision changes that not only could it influence projects based on what you're doing, but you're influencing the financial commitment in one way or another. And if that proposal was to be a significant cost increase, us as Clay County Commissioners have to have a interest in what you're doing, because ultimately, the vast majority of those funds that fund your watershed come from Clay County and the city of Moorhead. And so for example, if what you're talking about by making these changes does a drastic increase in the cost, before any decision is made like that, I think that all of the counties should be given a presentation at their full boards in regards to what your plan is. And I firmly believe that That's critical. And I say that to all of you who are here today and applying when it comes to that issue, that I think.
I couldn't agree with you more, Commissioner. And maybe I jumped too far when I said that, you know, I think it's gonna happen. I think it probably will happen in the future. But you're absolutely right. You know, we've had a watershed district that's been there now for 60 years. We're a 60-year-old district. A district that has won the best watershed award, I don't know how many times, several times. Mm-hmm. We have won awards for projects, one which you're intimately acquainted with, at Oakport, and also Manston Slough. Wolverton Creek just won one early this summer, again from Environmental Initiative, an organization that I think really does a good job. So you know, we have a highly functioning watershed district. We have had for years and years, one that is looked upon as a model within the state of Minnesota. And that's why it is so important that we don't tear that model apart and lose all of that. And I know there's some that said, well, it's easy, you know, you just make this switch. It's just like turning a switch. Well, it isn't like turning a switch. It's a whole lot more than that. It's a much more difficult process. And we've got to appreciate that. And we've got a really close relationship we have had for a long time with Houston Engineering, and I think some of them maybe question that. Well, it doesn't matter if it isn't Houston. It's going to be somebody else. It's going to be some engineering, because that's the way you get projects done. It takes engineering, and they've been very good to work with over the years. Not others might be too, but they certainly have. That's why we get the grants that we get. We have millions and millions of dollars of grants that we have been able to get because of the design and the close work with engineers that do most of the writing on those grants. So it's something that has to be looked at very, very carefully. You're right. Should it happen? I don't know. And I know that we are bringing and we've been asked just more recently, again, by the advisory committee to talk about this. I think that some of them want to meet and want to talk about it. I don't think we'll save any money, personally, at all by doing what we're doing. Some will say, hey, you're paying the Houston Engineering to supply you with people that work for the watershed district. That is very, very small amount. It isn't going to be as much as what it's going to cost us when we finally end up doing it ourselves, because you're going to have HR and a lot of other things involved in this process. So money's not the reason. Saving money is not the reason to be making this change. I just don't think that's a good argument at all. So
I think we're getting off more in the specifics of what's happening in the watershed board, and this is an interview board pretty much, so
yeah.
I think if there's any further questions concerning the interview, if not, thank you very much, Jerry, for your time.
Thank you, Commissioners. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Can I speak quickly? As someone whose portfolio consists fairly heavy in terms of environmental resources and drainage issues, you won't see three individuals that represent Clay County more. I've been on countless farm visits with Mark. He answers the call with our neighbors in whatever county that is, and is on those farms helping to make that better. And Paul, be it the state or locally, is representing Clay County on a lot of different levels. And Jerry as well. You go to any drainage or watershed conference or meeting, all three of them are at that. So I think we have a good pool of candidates with deep investments in Clay County, personal and also they just want to see the watershed and county succeed. So good applications.
I mean, at this point, I don't know, we just got interviews scheduled on this agenda, so I don't know, do we just drop it at that, put it on the agenda next week for the appointment, or?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. We had set, as part of the publishing, we set the 28th as our date that we would make the appointments.
Okay,
I have one other follow-up. It was brought to our attention that Paul is an appointed, elected supervisor for the SWCD. And I think it's important to note that by statute, elected officials aren't allowed to be watershed managers except SWCD managers. And I think for the record, it should be noted that that is also the case.
That's correct, Commissioner Mojo.
all right. Okay,
Did Dwayne?
you need a break here, or? Okay,
Should we take 5?
okay, we're gonna take a 5-minute break. Call this meeting back to order again. Next thing of our agenda is the preparation of budget presentation, excuse me. I wish I could talk. Tim, why don't you just come forward, we'll go with that.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right. I'm here to talk about my 2021 budget. In general, there's not a lot of changes from the 2020 budget, with the exception of 2 new requests that I have in there. Would you like me to go through each individual item and just kind of briefly talk about what we pay out of those line items, or just go right to the new requests?
Well, I guess, sometimes I wonder when nothing changes, you know, sometimes I think, well, did we look at that at all, you know, so, if you feel all those things should stay the same, then okay, you can pass over that, you know, but why are some items staying the same and not changing this, we need the same thing again, or?
Well, if you look at like one item, the equipment repair and maintenance, that actually has gone up by $9,000. That's due to some increases in contracts we have on hardware. You know, as we increase capacity, the charges go up. As we increase licensing, the costs go up, things like that. And data processing supplies, we actually lowered. We're starting a print management service this year with Marco, and we're hoping that that will decrease our costs in toner. Toner usually takes up well over half of our DP supplies. So we contracted with a company, and they're going to manage our printers and our toner, and we think there'll be some substantial savings, and that number may even drop further than the $68,000.
Okay.
The salaries and the slight increase in salaries obviously is from the step increases from the staff.
All right. And you said you had 2 big changes, or was the one,
Yep.
the data
Yep.
processing?
Oh, and one other thing I should mention on the proposed 2021 budget, I don't know if it's on yours or not, but I had neglected to put our proposed revenues in. I don't know if that's listed on yours.
It's not.
Okay, we're estimating $35,000 in revenue also, and I'm expecting that to be slightly higher, probably around 40 also. We're working with adding a few more counties onto our casework system. We don't have them 100% a go yet, so there's only 2 items that we get revenue for. One of them is the caseworks reimbursement, and the other one is any SSIS reimbursement that we get from social services for equipment that we supply to them.
So when you're talking about working with other counties, what do you do for them? Do you give them supplies, or do you give them
We host
software?
their software application for child support, social services, MNsure, and the financial units. So right now, we're hosting, I believe it's 19 counties here at Clay County, and they all access our system for their document management for their social services departments.
So they manage their own system at their office, but you supply,
They manage their own desktops and their own client at their desktop, but they actually do attach here to Clay County. All their data is located here.
They store their data here.
Yep.
okay. Very good, all right.
Yep.
Thank you. I guess the dues and membership, what, did we join some new, because it's going up 61%?
Yeah, the big change there is our dues to MnSITLA, which is our Minnesota County Leadership Association. We have contracted with a person to be our liaison to AMC to represent technology interests to AMC, so we have a voice on that board. And all the counties in Minnesota that are part of MnSITLA have pitched in a little bit towards that, and that was that increase.
Okay. Any questions for Tim? Yeah, go ahead.
Tim, in discussing, I think your department has really had a change in terms of remote access and going forward with that. Commissioner Campbell and I are on the CARES committee and looking forward with how to disperse monies, but how the expenses that counties have incurred because of that. And I know that you've had to purchase some more equipment for that.
Yes.
And I know in our discussion at those meetings, we've brought your department up to talk about going forward, do we have the equipment that we need if this were to last longer, or even it's kind of forced us into having people work remotely, and I think it's been working really well, but there obviously are costs that will be incurred because of that. Are the equipment that you need, is that reflected in this budget?
It is not.
Okay.
No. Our plan, what we'd like to do is, I shouldn't say some of it could be, we would just be changing how we spend some of that money, but it isn't enough to fully go with like a mobile workforce.
What is that number? I mean, it's probably high, I know, in
Yeah.
terms of storage capacity and equipment and
Well,
all of that, but.
I think the example we used, if we wanted to swap out, say, 200 desktop computers and swap them out with a laptop configuration at their desk, so that when they were told, go home, whether it's a pandemic or any other type of emergency,
Yep.
they grab their laptop, go home, everything would be set up, they'd basically just log in and they'd be working from home. We're gonna look at about 200 of those, you know, with a docking station set up, you know, it'd be about $300,000.
Well, please supply that information to
Yeah.
Steve. It's something we're very interested in making sure that we can try to, we understand what could come and the potential need for that.
Yep. Things were working really well for what we did and what we had. But a lot of things that happened, you know, a lot of departments had a bunch of laptops laying around. They might have been checkout laptops. You know, they may not have been the person's laptop. So, you know, they pull some of these out of bags. Some of them were 6, 7 years old.
Right.
And we're trying to get them up and running, and the experience, you know, may not have been great for that person. And so they ended up, you know, coming back and working in the office. And I think we saw that in a lot of different places, where they tried to use some of their own home equipment to connect back. So I think we'd really like to make a drive and supply the employees with the proper equipment.
And I think from our perspective too, if this goes longer, or if schools are virtual, and no matter what happens with COVID, I think we've made a transition to see, okay, well, if the service can stay the same or better, and we are more flexible in terms of remote access, we want to make sure that we're set up for that.
Right.
And I think the customer service is number one. And if that means that we need to retrofit old stuff or get new stuff, we need to have those conversations.
Yes.
And I think it goes beyond just the laptop itself. I think we need to be looking at what types of software is out there. And this gets more into, you know, from a standpoint of the public wanting to make sure that there's accountability. Because there is that accountability piece that we have to give to our citizens. And what is out there that could be on those laptops? If somebody's working from home, we know they're working from home.
Yeah. There's a lot of different choices out there, and obviously with what's going on now, there's getting to be more and more choices of
Right.
of
But I
applications
think,
that do that.
what I'm saying is I think you need to incorporate that within what we're talking about here.
Yes, absolutely.
Just one minor thing, that unemployment compensation, that minus, is that just something that used to be, we gave we charged each department unemployment compensation? You know anything on that, Steve, or?
My understanding for the departments, Lori has that in a separate section of the budget that incorporates all of the departments now.
Because I see the last entry was 2018, so.
Right.
Okay. Right,
I would note, and it goes to the question that was brought forward earlier by Commissioner Mojo, in the event that there may be dollars that be brought forward to address this moving forward. But we do know, in looking at Tim's professional service budget, that he's had some challenges over the years, infrastructure-wise now with desktops and monitors and printers. It was a stretch there, and so if we're looking at a more remote, laptops are more expensive than desktops, docking stations. We would probably really need to encourage Tim to take a look at that professional service number and adjust that. So after this first initial purchase that could be potentially covered under CARES Act, we would want to make sure that we have the ability, infrastructure-wise, to purchase the next laptop. Right.
So you're talking internal services.
Internal services.
Yeah,
Okay.
moving forward, but
Yeah.
the initial,
Yes.
you know, I mean, we're doing this because of COVID.
Yes.
And it's track the expenses that it's caused your department.
Right.
We've talked about this with public health and the sheriff's department. There's been costs incurred by you.
Yes.
There has, yes.
Okay, any further questions for Tim?
I'm just curious, the new request with.
Oh, yes. So we are requesting a new position. I guess I didn't do a department update this year, but just real briefly, in our department, we have myself, we have 4 computer support personnel, and we have 3 system admins. So what I'm requesting is an additional system admin. And these are the folks that take care of all the county infrastructure, you know, all the file servers, all the firewalls, the security, the ransomware protection, the wireless systems, the routers, the cabling, the phone system, the virtual servers, patching the systems. I mean, the list is endless on the things that they do. They manage, we have 17 wiring closets in the county, spread around 8 different buildings. Each one has infrastructure in it that they manage. There's been an increased demand for security services, which these guys, you know, update and monitor, like our phishing campaigns that we push out to everybody.
Fishing with PH.
With PH, yes.
Not FI.
Been highly successful. Typically we're down to less than a 1% rate where our employees might get caught with a simulated phishing email. They're guarded against hackers, viruses, malware, ransomware, all that kind of good stuff. And they also are in charge of managing that CaseWorks infrastructure that we get that revenue for.
So you got room for that position in your office?
We would have to make room. Those are discussions that we are having constantly.
Okay. Very good.
Well, I can see where your department has been escalated with what you have needed over this.
Yeah, it's
past
been a
few
real
months.
demanding year.
Mhm.
It's just a real change in how we do support. You know, we've had less than half of our staff on site now for 3 months. So these system admins typically will have one on site, 2 will be working from home, but they might be doing a Teams meeting where they're remoting into their own desktop, and then from that, they're remoting into these other systems while working with a vendor to fix things or update things. It's just incredible how they're still able to function at the level they are. I think they're doing an amazing job. You know, they've been putting in a lot of overtime. I'd hate to see these folks get too stressed out. And so we're trying to alleviate some of that pressure from their demands.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
And Brian Melton with the county attorney's budget. I got an extra copy of county attorney, someone doesn't have your copy.
All right. Good morning, Commissioners, Mr. Chair. So the budget for the county attorney's office is largely salary. I do have some changes. So within the salary, we, as you know already, but contain the law library, the county attorney's office itself, and then the victim services as well. And so I do have some change within the victim services that I'll talk to you in the third part. But just going through it then, walking through it, the law library really is a zero sum. It pays for itself through law library fees within the court services. So every defendant has a fee that's attached to their cost if they're convicted. That generates income or revenue, and that pays for the law library salary as well as the remainder of the cost within the law library. As you can see, it hasn't really changed over probably the last 5 years. And again, zero sum, unless you have any questions about that. I know Commissioner Moju is on the board. We always have somebody on the board. I, of course, administer and watch the salary. We have a good part-time law librarian there now. It's been remaining open through COVID, just by appointment only, because it's really for people to do research, but also there's some self-help pieces within the law library so that they can come there if they need to do protective orders, that kind of thing. So we do have a very good law library, as you know, here downstairs in the basement of the courthouse, that's maintained one of the best within the state, and continues to do a good job of allowing people to have access if needed. So if no questions there, we'll jump down the county attorney's portion. Under the revenues, as you can see, really, obviously, we're not a revenue generating department, and nor should we really be. There are some grants that we have had in the past or still have ongoing within the restorative justice area. We do get the refund that's under miscellaneous that's calculated each year. Those are different things that we get for pieces that we do. So that's the line 5838. If we're in court doing certain things for social services and working on their behalf, we can get money back for that, as well as then the child support. When we do child support issues, we can also get refunded. So some different refunds that we have there, grant money. One of the things you'll note, or I'll note to you here, but I'll more talk about in the restorative justice areas, we've had more funding in the past in our grants, and some of those grants have over time dried up, which happens at times where you have grant money, you use it, and then either if that grant goes away, you either lose that person that was working under that grant and they're just gone, or we have to look at other funding or potential other funding to supplement to keep those people. So we have had some loss of grant funding over the last couple of years, and it's gone down. Under expenses then, really we're looking at salaries, and you can see where we're at for proposed 2021, both full-time, part-time. Salaries are increasing as costs go up or as attorneys stay, which they typically do, and get more experience, the cost will increase. So really nothing else there. Probably our biggest increase on the next page, 6232, we continue to have costs under printing and publishing, which is really, in the past, that would have been keeping statute books and those kinds of things up, but really now most everything is online. So that's our Westlaw subscription cost that we use to do research that we have to do when we're writing briefs for the court. That would also actually include as well a lot of our cost increase lately are out of town subpoenas. So if we have witnesses that are down in Minneapolis, let's say, or down in Hennepin County, we have to subpoena them, we incur a cost from that sheriff's department. Now, our sheriff's department in turn should be charging, and I don't know if they do or don't, but we do get costs charged against us if we do any subpoena for a witness that's not within our county. So that's a cost that we continue to see increase all the time. So that's probably the biggest one there. I think otherwise, probably under computer software, 6404, that always continually goes up. That's the Minnesota County Attorneys Association and our what we call MCAPS, the Minnesota County Attorney Association Prosecutors Service. That's our database and system that we use to track all of ours, and we pay for that by user and by the amount that's within the size of the county. Otherwise, cost-wise, there's really nothing else to address in that top portion. Under prosecution services, what you used to know as the Moorhead-Dilworth, we used to have costs that we amortized or had underneath that salaries. We now just have the city of Hawley that we do the city prosecution services for. We just roll that up under all of ours. It's just a small portion then, since we don't have Moorhead-Dilworth, Barnesville anymore, and Glendon as a prosecution service that we provide. And then I guess beyond that, there would just be, so expense-wise, there's a portion that we use under the restorative justice contract that we pay as part of the victim services. That's the salary that you see there, which is a portion. And then finally, we go to victim service advocate section. So currently that section is Michelle Olsanowski. She's the director. She's a full-time employee. She has Nikki Erickson, who's a 32-hour, I guess you'd consider a 3/4 time individual. And in the past, grant funded, they had a full-time, an additional third full-time person, and then a secretarial position that was part-time to help administer that. And I will just tell you that really the victim services section is probably one that's been very, I guess, either underfunded or, I don't want to use the word neglected, but I'll just tell you, even back in 2018, when she had the 3 full-time people and the secretary position, we were talking about whether we would look to add a 4th person. And if you look at, I usually use Blue Earth. They're very comparable to us at times. They've in the past had 5 victim service people. They're about the same size as our office. So victim services is really responsible largely for all of the statutory requirements that we have to notify victims, keep them informed of the process of what's going on, talk to them about ongoing issues that might be going on in cases. They're constantly working with them to help the victims understand the process. If there's victim impact statements at the end during sentencing, all those types of things they work on. Well, because of grant funding now, they're down to just Michelle as the director, Nikki Erickson as the 32-hour person, and then a part-time person in Lexi. So we had a different person. She left and went to St. Cloud. It just happened that coincided at the time when our grant funding was reducing, so that actually, to a degree at least, worked out okay, because that otherwise we would have had to change that person over to part-time without benefits and everything else. But So what I'm looking at and what I'm asking for is additional salary under the regular salaries to the current person who's part-time, Lexi, would look to go to full-time. So that's what I'm asking for, that would at least get them back up to 2 full-time people and a 32-hour person. So at least they can manage to a degree, what they have. We had discussions, or, some of the discussion was whether we look to try to add a full-time person on top of what they currently have. But I think right now, just with budget constraints, I wasn't gonna look to ask for that, but I'm looking to try to at least get her back to close to what they had back 2 years ago. So that's the request for additional salary under the Victim Service Advocate section. And otherwise, there's really no other change to the costs and expenditures within the victim service area. And that's pretty much my budget. Any questions?
Everybody okay with that?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
In terms of COVID, as kind of the same thing that I asked Tim, obviously there's a major backlog in courts right now. How do you foresee us getting through this in terms, I know that we've talked a little bit about adding a courtroom, that's probably gonna have to happen, but I'm sure you have a huge backlog.
I think there's going to be a huge, there is a huge backlog, and I think we're gonna work through some very difficult times coming up. And I've talked a lot with my staff about it while we had the downtime and we were working from home. I just wanted them to recognize, all right, this is a downtime, and let's get anything we can get done. If it is, sitting on the back burner, any other projects or things that we may work on, because we know that once trials do resume, what we expect to be August 21st or August 28th is our expected date now. Originally it had been July 21st, and that date came and went, that timeline came and went in that the district, or Clay County, is still applying to the district to get permission and demonstrate that they've got an entire project ready to go to make sure they're keeping everybody safe and jurors safe. And to get that approved, it's now approved, but to implement it, it'll take through till August 21st. And so we expect we'll start doing trials then. We won't do more than one trial at a time, just based on how we have to bring people in, keep them spread out, all those types of things. And so we'll just have to work through the backlog as it comes. I think there will be some difficult issues the court will have to address at some point, where we may have trials, say, Monday, Tuesday, or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then go back to back and have a different trial Thursday, Friday. Those types of things that we'll have to do to try to clear the backlog and try to tackle that docket, that there's a lot of trials that are just hanging out there waiting. So, but I don't think there's any cost necessarily associated with it, or anything that we can do. There's not a technology piece that we can add. I wouldn't say there's even a personnel piece really that we can add. I mean, we're able to administer it. We just have to now get to it and start doing it.
Any other questions? No, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
And now, Rhonda. The social service budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. I did lay on your chairs my handout. Apologize for that not getting in the board packet.
None of them were in there, so.
Okay, good. It's not just me. I was hoping Brian would be asking for more money and me and I could come in and look a little better, but social service budget, as you know, is kind of evolving. Okay, so what I've done is just a summary sheet for you. Our budget line item detail is about 35 pages, so what I have been doing is providing a summary sheet, and then we can obviously certainly go back to various line item detail as well. I am still waiting for some second quarter information in terms of our revenues and some additional information from DHS on some of our revenues. So I suspect I'll probably need to come back sometime in August with any updates if changes to the budget would be needed. But as of today, just to summarize, you'll see in the left-hand upper corner there, our 2020 levy request, and then the 100,000 fund balance that was decided to be used. So the total levy request was at $11,330,057. The 2021 budget, as it sits right now, my levy request is $11,627,677. So there's a difference of $297,620. So that represents about 2.63%. On the right-hand side, I went through the budget to identify what are those budget areas that are most impacting the levy. As you know, our budget has various pass-through programs, so as money passes through, there's a corresponding expenditure and revenue. So just looking at the bottom line numbers really don't tell the story. You have to kind of go through the lines to identify which ones have the most impact on the levy increase or a levy adjustment. The first one you'll see there is step adjustments. As you know, we have had quite a bit of turnover in social services over the last couple of years, and as new employees come in, they're in the early stages of our grid, and so annually they have those step adjustments. So that is reflected there. At 132,786. The other piece that is impacting the levy is the new staff that you approved in 2020 here for the social worker and the case aide. And I'm going to come back to that because there's some additional pieces I want to share with you, but I'll keep going down this list and then come back to that piece. Contracted providers, you'll see in the middle of the page there, those increases represent about a little over 22,000. This is not an exhaustive list of our contracts, but they are the contracts that are representing the levy impact. Lakeland Mental Health Center is about a 3% increase from 2020 to 2021, and the rest are 2% increase for those contracted providers. Lakeland has not submitted their formal request to their counties yet, but they did indicate that they didn't anticipate it being more than 3%, so that's just what I put in the budget. And Commissioner Mojo, I know you're on the board if you have anything more, but I think they were evaluating some of their revenues and expenditures as it relates to COVID and what that was.
Yeah, from what I know, the discussions we've had at that board level is that they were being sensitive to what counties are experiencing right now in terms of what the ask would be. They did ask for a reduction for the contribution in 2019. I do know that won't be the case. It will be closer to what the previous year would be.
So I put that 3% in there just as an anticipation, and if that changes, that would change the budget. Detox, you'll see our line item actuals there from 2016, 17, 18, and 19. What we have budgeted for 2020 and what the proposed budget request is for 2021. So that represents a little over $50,000 increase to the budget from 2020 to 2021.
Is that based on salaries? What causes the 2% increase? The salaries, or is there something else involved there?
For detox?
Yeah.
I haven't seen the line item budget yet from Kathy, but salaries is a big piece of it, and steps and managing the 16-bed facility. Some of it is revenues as well, although they have a very nice contract with Southeast Human Services, which helps to bring down the county expenditures for detox. But salaries is one of the bigger parts to that budget. County attorney, this is, as Brian mentioned, in his budget, he has revenues, which is a transfer from the social service budget. They work with our department in child protection, in our income maintenance, in our child support unit, and this increased reflection is, again, really the costs for their employee costs. When our, those costs go up, then our contribution to those supports for my department go up as well. So that was just a little over 11,000. Mental health commitments and holds, this is a budget area that always can cause some major fluctuations in the social service budget. It's kind of a lot like out-of-home placements. If you can see there, you'll see in 2016, we actually spent $661,000, and then in 2017, it went way down to $296,000. A big part of that was we had some county cost share changes from that time period, and then you'll start to see them jump up again in 2018, 2019. And you can see in 2020, we're under budgeted for what these costs in these program areas have been. And so I felt that I probably need to start addressing this area a bit. So I added 31,000 to these areas. We're seeing more and more requests for civil commitments in our mental health area. Not all of them result in a commitment, but when they do, it adds costs to the county. And those costs are paid for out of the social service budget. So I did adjust that upward a bit for 2021.
So, Mr. Chair, can I ask, so on all these, where you have these going back and showing these dollar amounts for different years, are those the budgeted amounts for that year or the actuals?
Those are actuals, what we actually spent up through 2019, and then you got the 2020 budget. And, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, what's happened, like in some of the years where we were quite high, we fortunately had some lower children out-of-home placement expenses, so they kind of balanced each other out in terms of the bottom line overall. But this is an area that they also, if you recall conversations we had where if an individual is ready to be discharged from a state facility, if we cannot get them out right away, we're charged 100% of the cost of care, and that's around $1,500 a day. So it's caused quite a budget impact for a number of counties, and we've always complained about this issue with the state. They now have an appeal process that we can submit appeals as to why we think we should not be held responsible for the 100% cost of care for various reasons. So we try to take advantage of that when we can. But yeah. And then just a small budget increase in our nursing home cost of care. We have a cost share for any individual under 65 that goes into a nursing home. The county has a share to that cost. And as the cost of the daily per diem for nursing homes goes up, our costs go up a little bit slightly as well. So I just made a slight adjustment in that budget based on what our actuals have been over the years. Going down, one of the things I wanted to show you was, if you recall, in 2020, in March, myself and the child protection supervisors came before you and asked for an additional 0.5 social worker. We got a grant, and we were going to make, we got a grant to pay for part-time, and we were asking for county funds to pay for the 0.5 to make it a full-time. A couple months later, we came back and asked for another social worker and a case aide. And then recently came back and asked for a social worker to utilize our opioid response funds to kind of hire that last social worker that we felt we needed to get child protection caseloads down. So I wanted to recap for you those staff that we hired since that time, what those costs are for 2021, and what budget adjustments we made in order to pay for those staff. So you can see on the first grid where it says 2021 budgeted costs for staff, the total cost is the 286,349. And then the budget adjustments, whether that be expenditure reductions or revenue increases, is 248,883. So you can see our revenue or expenditure reductions don't quite meet the staff costs. And that's what that 37,466 is up at the top right. That's the new funds needed in the levy in order to pay for those staffing positions that you approved. One of the things that happened when I came to you in June relative to the opioid funds, our allocation was for 2020 was $63,940 from July to December of 2020, and I asked the board for approval to hire a social worker starting around July 15th at a cost of a little over $40,000, and we would use these funds to pay for that position in 2020. And then in 2021, the information from the state was that our allocation would likely double because it was only for 6 months. So we felt we'd have enough money to pay for that position, which is around $87,000. Since then, we've had 3 different revisions from the state on our allocation, and emails from the state about the opioid response account not getting the revenues that the state anticipated. And so cuts were made across the board for these funds. If you recall, this was established in 2019, and the funds the state were getting were fees on opioid manufacturers and wholesalers, and those fees came in significantly lower than what the state anticipated. So last Thursday, we got a new allocation amount for Clay County, and our $63,000 that we were supposed to get in 2020 went down to $23,576. And our 2021 allocation went to $67,883. So that is not enough funds to pay for the full-time position that I had asked you for in June. So we're short, and this analysis shows that shortfall.
But that's part of the 37.
Yes. With the hope that you would support us to continue to move forward, knowing that it is requiring a bit of a levy increase to keep that position. The position has not started yet. The person is scheduled to start on Monday. We've offered the position, she's accepted, has resigned from her position, and is scheduled to start Monday. So I'm hopeful that you will allow us to continue to move forward with that, even with the shortfall. But it's the fear that you have expressed before, that as we get these grants, if we lose them, what happens? And this is an example of that. Our state association is continuing to work with DHS on this issue, but for now, I really just have to go off of the revised allocations that they've given us based on the revenue that they're getting. So that shortfall is reflected in this.
So you think those revised things that you're getting, which is sitting at 67,000 right now?
Yeah.
You think it's going to change again, or is that the final? Or?
I am hopeful that it won't. I think DHS heard loud and clear how frustrated counties were about the short notice, because these funds for 2020, we could start spending July 1st. in counties already entered into various contracts for increased services, have hired staff, like have moved forward with approving staff like we have in some situations. So, you know, although I can't be certain because it all depends on the fees they collect, I'm hopeful that it won't.
So, Rhonda, if I can, I'm a little confused here. So so you took the difference of the 286, 349 and the 248, 883, and that's where you came up with 37.
Yeah.
But yet you're saying you haven't even hired this person yet. So wouldn't that amount also have to be in the 2021 budget?
Yep, I did include her. That is where it says Amy L.
Okay.
That is her 2021. That would be
This
her.
is the new hire.
Yes.
So, okay, so that's what
So
that
she
is.
yeah.
So the difference of the 85,995 and the 67,883 is what the county is paying for that position,
Yes.
which before we had anticipated 100%.
We had anticipated 100%, yes.
Thank you. I just wanted that clarification.
So I also provided, just because out-of-home placements is such a big budget item, I did provide a summary for you on your second page. If you look mostly at the middle line there that's highlighted in gray, that is the net effect on the levy. So if you go over to the far right, you'll see the one column that says 2019 actual. So we had budgeted 2.5 million for out-of-home placement net costs in 2019, and we spent 2.323. So we came in a little under budget there. 2020, our trend is that we're going to be on target to spend that 2.5. We have 5 months of expenditures listed there. What we did for 2021 is we did not change the net impact on the levy at all. We kept it at 2.5. We will see some daily per diem rates go up. Daily per diem rates went up with West Central, but we were feeling that if our trend continued like 2019, our budget could still manage that. So we kept the overall net on the budget for placements at 2.5 million.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Rhonda, I know in 2015 when this really spiked in terms of numbers, we were pretty active in meeting as a committee to talk about areas that we could better serve kids, prevention. As these numbers seem to be creeping up a little bit, you know, I think it's concerning to me that they're at where they are in a year where maybe kids aren't in school and they're not, you know, having eyes able to report if something's a problem. Is it worth having this at committee level discussion again?
Yes, absolutely, and that's on my radar to get our group back together, because there's a number of issues I think as a group we do need to talk about. I did want to review West Central and the programming, as well as some of our 4E claiming revenue pieces. So I do feel that the group should come back together and kind of recap where we were and some strategies going forward. So that is on my radar to do.
Because I'm hopeful, like you are, that the 2021 will stay where it's at. You know, if you look at these trends, it doesn't appear that it will.
Yeah, one of the things we are experiencing is with some of our kiddos that were close to permanency, where they could leave the foster care system to a permanency option, whether that be adoption or transfer of custody. Some of the court delays and some of the delays at the Department of Human Services have pushed some of those out a little bit further. So they have kind of delayed some of those kiddos kind of coming off the placement role, so to speak. So I'm hopeful that as that backlog starts moving, we're starting to see some movement at DHS for those adoptions to get finalized and moving forward, that we'll see some kids coming off of this list. The other thing is, as West Central has started to increase their programming, I'm hopeful to see what impact that will have on kids that we would have typically placed out of the county in other facilities to stay here. So,
Okay.
yeah. Any questions on this? Otherwise, I did have 2 new requests in the budget for 2021. The first one is more planning for attrition and retirement. In our income maintenance unit, currently in 2020, at the beginning of the year, you had approved adding a financial worker for our long-term care programs. This is where we have one employee that's been with us for 40 years and another one around 18 years, and they were managing caseloads of around 700 when the statewide average was about 300. You had approved us to add a financial worker to that program area, so we have done that, and that financial worker is working there. Now, the 2 staff that we had, the one is set her retirement date in December of 2020 here. She'll be retiring. And so, no, I'm sorry, December of 2021, she's retiring. So I had included 2 income maintenance workers to start in October of 2021 for training purposes before she leaves in December, which she'll be leaving earlier because she'll likely back up her vacation time. So she probably will be, actually done working sometime in November. So I was planning on adding 2 in October. She would retire in December, and then the second one is planning to retire in March. So I was kind of working through some attrition planning, but wasn't looking for those positions to start till October, and calculated out if that were to happen, it would be a county cost of a little over $16,000. So that's in the new request column in my budget. I wanted to bring it up now because I know that coming mid-year can be complicated, and I've done my share of that, coming mid-year asking for positions. However, if the board would want to look at that later on, that's fine too, but I just did put that in there. And then the second area, new request, I was looking for a social worker in our home and community-based service area. That's a program area where the staff earn revenue and they manage home and community-based waiver services. And the cost of that employee, they can earn enough revenue to pay for their position, and that's how I built it in the budget. We would be, some of the staff in these program areas actually earn revenue over and above what it costs to employ them. And we would hold that standard with this position as well. We have that new space on 4th floor and have the capacity to add the staff person and bring those caseloads down a little bit lower just to make it more manageable for the staff. So I included the cost of the staff as well as the revenue, which would offset it. So it wouldn't be a levy impact for that position. So those are in the new column in my budget. So that is it. We are continuing to look at a few revenue areas. Once we get some quarter 2 data, it's possible we maybe could make some additional adjustments, hopefully to the good, although we won't know probably for another few weeks what those revenues are.
All right, thank you, Rhonda.
Do you need us to discuss that employee coming in?
Well, again, I just wanted you to know she officially hasn't started. It's scheduled to start Monday. For 2020, the wage calculator, it would cost about $40,000 from now until the end of the year, and our allocation was 23. So that difference I will have to absorb in the 2020 budget somewhere. I do feel that with our turnover and some other budget areas that I can be watching, that we would be fine.
My perspective, I think it's a really hard position to put an employee in when they have given notice to their employer, so they could start this position. I would say the same thing for the state. I think it's really unfortunate and unfair that they communicated that the level would be this level, and we went forward with approval and an advertisement of a position, and then it changed.
I will say that the person we hired was employed with West Central at the Juvenile Center. So.
I know I've seen this, but your 2019 final numbers, were you revenues over expenditures?
We were revenues over expenditures, yeah.
By how much?
I want to say about 600. Let me look here.
So I think we've got some room there if
Yeah.
we need to.
Yep, 639. Yep, and you can kind of pinpoint exactly in the budget, there's about 5 areas that kind of represent that big issue.
Yeah, and we don't need to get into that right now. I just wanted to emphasize that dollar amount.
Yes.
But I think before September, we can review all this and
Yeah.
take that into
Yeah,
consideration.
absolutely, yes.
Okay.
So I don't know if it would require a motion or not, I just wanted you.
Well, you already have the approval for
Yep.
for this
yep,
year,
yep.
right? We've
And the
already,
interesting thing is we had to submit a plan to DHS with how we were gonna spend the money. Submitted the plan, got it back approved, about a week later, oh, sorry, you're not gonna get all that money. So it is quite frustrating. All right,
All righty.
thank you.
I like your recap here.
Thank you.
I think you did very, very nice job there.
Thank you.
Let's see, do you want to go to committee reports before we close session, or?
Does Brian need to go?
Fine.
It's okay?
Hey, Grant, do you want to start us out today?
Yeah, let's see, I had Dance in the Sky meeting on Monday, and that was just updates on the various programs, and everything's going pretty well with the senior programs right now. I had EDC Executive Committee and also a meeting with Joe Razzo about what's going on with the EDC, and mainly updates there, and talking about now next year's budget and financial issues with the EDC. And then we had Detention Advisory Board and a PIC committee meeting, and that was it for me.
Okay. Jenny?
Thank you. Last week I attended MetroCog's meeting. I'm trying to pull up the agenda here. Policy board meeting. Good discussion. There's some significant work that will be done. Basically Fargo to Grand Forks on the interstate system, that median wiring in the center of the road. So they talked a lot about that. A lot about North Dakota projects, but good information on the Metro Grow that's going on. You can go onto MetroCog's website and kind of see all of that's going on. And there is some pretty good discussion happening in terms of the Clay County comp plan. I know that that's something that we've talked about for a long time that needs to be done. When we hired our new planning and zoning director, that was one of the questions on his interview, is if you were confident in doing one of those plans. And opportunities come up at MetroCog that they could do that work pay for a lot of it. The county would have to pay for some of it, but we talked about Clay County's willingness in doing that. From my perspective, it's an opportunity to get it done. Our plan is very outdated, and MetroCog could pay for some of the work. So just so you know, that discussion will be coming forward.
We had that discussion at highway tracking too.
Oh, good.
On that, moving forward with that.
Okay. Then both Commissioner Campbell and I were appointed to the Coronavirus Relief Fund. We're calling it the CARES Act Committee. We met last Thursday with staff on going forward with that, talking about the allocation amounts. Quickly identified that it's going to be a several pronged approach in how we move forward in using the money that was given to, or allocated for Clay County. We met again yesterday with Dan Molly from the city of Moorhead and Derek LaPointe in terms of what Moorhead will be doing, allocating for EDA business pieces, as well as what the city is looking at. We will be meeting both Wednesday and with cities and township officials, and then again Thursday. It's kind of hit the ground running type of a committee. Did I miss another meeting? We did have another meeting on Wednesday.
Last Wednesday.
Where we had a conference call with counties to see how counties are allocating the dollars. Our hope is that we can create a plan moving forward on the first items we want to address for board discussion on Tuesday. Is that correct? A week from today. So we'll work on that this week and then get more information to you as we go. I think that concludes my report.
Kevin?
Thank you. Highway tracking was on the 14th, and one of the items was that comprehensive plan, and I know as we move forward with MetroCog, one of the things that I brought up was that we should have, Commissioner Mojo and Frank, I know you're in, these are a lot of rural issues, and so I think as that moves forward, we need to establish that group that would include those two commissioners on to work with MetroCog. So then we had an update on the Felton Pit and the Riverton Pit update, or the Riverton land update. We had some discussion about MnDOT's location in Holly. They might be interested in getting rid of that.
No, buying it, isn't it?
Well, yeah, we have an opportunity.
Yeah, they're going to get rid of it.
Yeah, we have an opportunity to buy that, and it's a price that's very, very attractive. So more to come on that. And then we got some construction updates on several right-of-way on CSAH 1 and some information on CSAH 8, 14, and 33. Then we did have the CARES Act initial, where we did the video conference to see what other counties were doing. That same day, we had a insurance committee, and the focus on that committee was dealing with switching of dental, and I think the committee is going to decide within a couple of weeks of if that's going to be done. On Thursday, we had another CARES Act committee meeting that went in the morning, and that was the initial CARES Act group of all of us to determine try to figure out what our processes were going to be, and that's going to be a lot of meetings. The regional detention was also that morning. We approved the preliminary budget, which included credit to counties. We talked about some counties were turned away in 2019, so the board did approve to pay those people for having to have those extra costs, but those numbers did end up in their 2-year look-back number. And then the current preliminary budget was approved using revenues over expenditures from 2019 after the payback. and applying that towards the revenue line item for 2021, which helps bring everybody's bed prices down. Clay County, I think, Steve, if I'm not mistaken, the number we're down is going to be about 200 and some thousand. We're going to see a reduction, and that's because that facility is working out well with non-member revenue. That also then on Wednesday, we had a Prairie Lakes Budget Committee meeting. The biggest issue there is we're seeing a potential increase in the 2020-21 budget of an additional $380,000 because of that insurance deal, which right now, if that was incorporated into the budget, it would amount to an over 10% increase in the tipping fees that go on there. But we are looking at some options on a one-year basis to reduce what we might be putting into internal service fund for that. But those decisions will be made this week on Wednesday. Then on yesterday, I had two meetings. We had the Diversion Authority executive meeting in the morning, and typically it was more of individual stuff on recaps of where we are with legal issues and some North Dakota legislative updates and land management updates, so on and so forth. And then again, that afternoon, yesterday afternoon, we met with, as Jenny talked, we met with the city of Moorhead to kind of determine what their plans are through the CARES Act in dealing with business. So we're trying to put that together with how we want to treat all of Clay County. So that concludes my report.
Okay, Jim?
Thank you. On Wednesday, I attended the COVID-19 task force meeting over at the Fargo City Hall. That was my only meeting.
Okay. In my meetings were last Tuesday, the Personnel Issues Committee, I think Grant, I don't know if you reported that or not, but you were at that meeting too. That there we mostly discussed just the CARES Act too, how it's going to affect, how we recommend every department to look at how it's affected them so we can submit funds to get refunded on that. Highway tracking, which Commissioner Campbell's already discussed, other than I think in Elton Township there's a gravel pit or some area that we were going to save for a gravel pit, but Dave said that it's probably not necessary, that we could probably get that into one of the items that we could sell on the public lands. We could probably sell that area. Historical Society on Wednesday, everything's going pretty good considering what's happening there with the COVID, that they just opened back up again, that they are having people come back there again. We've been getting some good donations there, which so the Historical Society is still doing fairly good financially, but the Comstock House is closed. So everything else, good report there in the Historical Society. Got several, working with a resident in Cromwell Township, noise nuisance situation, so made several trips out there already and trying to get that settled. Other than that, I think that was it for me. Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The 14th, participated in the highway tracking. That's been covered. Also the PIC. On the 15th, I participated in the webinar that Commissioner Mojo and Commissioner Campbell and some of the rest of our committee attended, hearing some feedback specifically from Rock County, Dakota County, and Candy-Ojai counties as far as their corona relief funding programs. Later that morning, we participated in the insurance committee. That's been covered by Commissioner Campbell. And the following day, the Corona Relief Fund Committee, again, that's been addressed. On the 16th, that afternoon, we had a county administrator meeting where we discussed CARE Act, legislative updates. And then later that day, I met with Tim Dent on his technology budget that we heard this morning, and also met with Matt Jacobson on the Buffalo Red River Lomar map that this board initially picked up as an issue back in 2017. They've been working in collaboration with the Buffalo Red. They were contacted, Houston Engineering was contacted by FEMA that there's some additional work that needs to be done. And so Matt will probably be bringing that forward for some additional discussion to this board in upcoming meetings. On the 17th, we had county management where we heard public health update. The budget process was discussed, the coronavirus relief funding, and again, we asked our departments to collect the incurred costs that they have had through the COVID pandemic, and then also the anticipated costs that they believe they'll have through the remainder of this year. That afternoon, I participated in a meeting with the county administrators locally here and city managers, where we discussed COVID, the corona relief, and other shared interests. I also spent a significant amount of time last week reaching out to townships and representatives from the city to ensure that they were aware of the coronavirus relief funds. In many cases, they weren't, so we had a conversation about what that entailed and what funding was available, and also provided them documentation and email links to go about how they could receive the funding if they were eligible. Yesterday, we participated in planning and zoning budget discussion, HR budget discussion, which will be coming before this board next week, and again had a committee meeting with the city of Moorhead regards to the coronavirus committee. Just a couple things of note. I did receive an email this morning from Jessica Warren from AE2S. The board has asked that we earlier this summer that we send a letter to Georgetown requesting them a willingness to work with AE2S. This morning, Jessica and AE2S received notification that Georgetown denied the environmental easement. And so we'll have to have some additional discussions on that, I am sure. And lastly, I just wanted to touch base. I did have correspondence with Judge Gustafson. She was writing concerns based on all of the judges and court administration, based on some of the conversations that we had with Brian this morning, just making sure the county doesn't forget that their needs for additional court space, and that COVID and social distancing has caused additional demand on their services and only increase their issues as they move forward. And so that concludes my report.
Okay, just a reminder that I think you were all given the notice that Steve's evaluation is coming up, which is on August the 4th, so set aside a minute for that, to cover that day or two. Brian, did you have anything further to?
Nothing else other than our closed session piece.
Okay, and that from that on, yes, and we're going to go into closed session now.
I'll move to close.
Okay, we got a motion by
Second.
Grant. Did I get a second or I didn't?
Jim did it.
Oh, Jim, sorry, I didn't hear it. Okay, and a second by Jim to go into closed session. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we're now,
Sorry to interrupt you.
no, I'm sorry. Okay, Grant, you want to make your motion? Motion by Grant, second by Jim to reopen the meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, is there anything further to discuss? No, we're adjourned.